Hey Mac, great to connect. My wife and I have been saving to buy a home for several years, and we finally feel like we're comfortable taking the plunge. Rates are not ideal, but we've run the numbers in a mortgage calculator. Awesome. Similarly to how we've seen you do it in past videos, and we feel we're still comfortable with our expected monthly payments. Our only real hesitation right now is a lack of confidence in the market. Friends of ours who recently bought talked about how competitive it was and how many homes are still selling with multiple offers. We also see many articles about market corrections or potentially crashes and worry we might be jumping in right before that happens. Okay, fair. I have family members who work in real estate and they swear the market is strong and it's a good time to buy a home. And while I want to trust them, the advice feels too glass half full compared to what I'm hearing everywhere else. How can I figure out what to believe? What information do you look for when you're thinking about the question, is it a good time to buy a home? And I guess more directly, is it a good time to buy a home? I'm Matt Thomas with Baird & Warner here in Chicago. I live in Chicago and service Chicagoland area for my clients. I've helped hundreds of people buy, sell, and invest here successfully. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to this channel. I'm trying to make helpful content as often as possible. Share it with somebody who you think might find it interesting and useful. And this is a common question I'm getting. In this specific example, thank you again for reaching out. We're going to talk through how to approach this question. I think it's interesting. My hesitation always when, of everything that you sent in this letter, what stands out to me first is the fact that you have a family member who's an agent. Everybody does, and everybody tends to default to their friend, their family member, their cousin, whoever it is that happens to be a real estate agent. In many cases, that person may or may not be actively involved in the market enough to really advise you on what you're hoping to get out of it. And I would take it a step further in saying that you have to kind of push yourself on knowing what you're asking for. You know, if you're just asking, is the market in the United States right now a good buyer's market? We can have a general economic discussion and see, where we think that falls on the spectrum. But that's a very different question than if you're asking my opinion on investing in Irving Park, a neighborhood in Chicago, right? Like Irving Park is this big and it has microcosms of a market that we need to break down, and we would want to run some more comprehensive data than that. So how you're approaching this, it all depends on the framework of the questioning and the answers that you're getting back. If they're advising you correctly, they should be hyper-specific, and they should be asking you more questions so that you dig into what you're really looking at. But let's set all that aside. We all know good agents in life. You have a good agent. Let's trust that you're starting there. Let's hope that your family is just advising you based on what they're actually seeing in their local market or your local market, right? This question, and I didn't tell the end of this because I don't want to get into specifics that would make anybody uncomfortable, but this is talking about Rogers Park. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about Rogers Park today, and really less about the actual market itself, although if you're curious, this is a good example to learn, but more about how to actually answer this question. Is it a good time to buy is a fundamentally different question than, am I ready to buy? This person is, right? They self-admittedly, they've taken the time to sit down, they've financially prepared, they've done the intelligent thing, which is connecting with a lender and running mortgage calculators so that they feel comfortable, they know where their monthly payments are going to be, even with rates where they're at, right? So accepting the rates as they are and figuring out what they can afford, not just backing down because rates are higher than they want. That's not the problem here. They are ready to purchase, probably. Evaluating the market on its own is a different question. Anybody answering this question should start with data, in my opinion. There's really only one way to assess. Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? And you have to look at the underlying data. Right now, sight unseen, without even pulling it up, it's not a buyer's market. We don't have enough inventory in most parts of the city. So, we're operating at best at a slight lean towards sellers. And in many markets, it's just flat out a seller's market. They can charge more. They're getting multiple offers. It's kind of what it is right now. So if your only assessment of, is it a good time to buy is it a buyer's or a seller's market? It's not a buyer's market in Rogers Park in Chicago right now. So start there, right? Maybe that answers the question. But let's pretend it doesn't. We're going to break down some actual data. Now, I get to cheat. One of the benefits of having a license, I get to have access to things like live data from the MLS and see what's actually moving and what's not. So let's just jump right in and we're going to take a live look. So let's start by looking at the market data first. When I'm evaluating a market, not just to assess if it's a buyer or seller's market, that one's actually pretty easy to figure out, but more so to evaluate the health and how things are moving or how the market sales are performing. There's a couple of key metrics I start with. So because I said it's easy to figure out, why don't we start with the first one? Month supply of inventory is how I feel confident sitting here and saying Chicago in most markets is a seller's market. Month supply of inventory, and I'll just pull it up live. Month supply of inventory reflects on the number of homes that are currently on market and the amount of time it would take to sell all of those homes if nothing new listed. So theoretically, if we're at, in Rogers Park case, 1.5 months of inventory, we're saying that it would take about a month and a half to sell out of the existing inventory in Rogers Park if the activity that we have right now were to continue. That's pretty concerning. In a balanced market, we would hope to see like 3 to 6 months, ideally. 4 to 6 maybe would even be better. Over 6, that's when we're talking about a buyer's market. River North in Chicago is a great example where things were sitting for a long time. So going into COVID, it became a buyer's market. There was like 10 to 12 months inventory. Things would sit for a year. That's a market where you can negotiate and try to get some deals because people get desperate to sell. In this market, 1.5 months, and that's down from its peak, which is going into 2021, of about 3 months. So Rogers Park was balanced-ish in the beginning of COVID. Now we're nowhere near it. 1.5 months is really, really low. So throw it out the window. Again, not a buyer's market. But taking that away and just recognizing that that's not the case at the moment, why don't we look at some other important stats? So I like to look at sale price. I prefer to focus on median sale price as opposed to average. I think this gets rid of some of like the, extrapolations on the way outside. Pretty consistent here at Rogers Park. Maybe you don't like line graphs. Let's see, visualize it a slightly different way. So slightly down. This is looking at all single family categories. In this particular case, the question was about condos. So maybe we'll just change it to attached single family. It doesn't change the data too much here, but attached single family, you can see minus 2.5% from 2021 to 2022, minus 2.2% to 2023. So it's just kind of flat to slightly down in Rogers Park right now. Pricing hasn't really gone anywhere drastic. If we go back to this line chart and back out a little bit more, to me, that looks more like a reflection of a correction that probably should have happened, right? So this is backing out long-term 10-year period. You could see there was a period where you can get into Rogers Park. Hey, $65,000 doesn't sound bad. Now we're hovering close to 191. But even if we look at this 5-year trend, what I really notice here is see in the beginning of 2020 here, where we have this massive spike in pricing. And this was peak pricing, 2021. This is about when rates really started to shift. We stopped seeing 2s and 3s. We started seeing 4, 5, 6. And ever since, rates have kind of continued to climb. So this is expected to me. And it's kind of the case for many markets right now. So at surface value, I'm not too concerned about the prices in Rogers Park. I don't foresee like a huge discount in the future. It doesn't look like prices are going anywhere fast. Maybe they'll come down another % or 2, but depending on the situation, you might be able to negotiate that anyway. And let's look at that next. So after I look at the actual median sale price, so what are homes moving for, I like to look at the market time. Market time, again, you can look at average or you can look at median. I think median does a better job of actually showing the market and what's moving right now. 16 days. So homes are not selling for a crazy value over where they were a year or two ago, but they are definitely selling fast. A couple weeks on market is about the only opportunity you're going to have to look at it. And not only that, but the percentage of original lists, I like to look at the median price always, 99.6%. So think about what that means. Percentage of original lists, percentage of the original list price that this sale is closing at. That means right now your average negotiating power is less than 1% in Rogers Park. A couple years ago, it was somewhere around 4%. This is on median, so could you beat these numbers? Sure, but this is what most people are doing right now. 99.6% of sale price. So homes are selling fast. They're loosely maintaining value, if not slightly declining based on recent corrections. And you're not really able to negotiate that much out of the price, mainly because there's not that many options for sale. So when we're looking at, is it a good time to buy? I'm looking at this market and seeing chances are good homes are going to be competitive right now. It's probably going to cost you, if not a premium, at least close to list value on homes. So run good numbers to make sure that you feel confident in the list price and expect to move quickly. If you're seeing a market time of 16 days, your average closing is 30 to 60 days. If you're in a lease now that expires in 9 months, have a plan. You're going to have to deal with that in like a month, right? So is it a bad time to buy in this market? I think it's a competitive time to buy in this market. What would indicate a bad time to me? If pricing was on a major decline, that would be something I would want to pay attention to, right? To see, is that a correction? Is that a continuation? How far do we think that's going to go before you sink hard-earned money and investment in this? I also would want to know, in this case, the homes aren't really being negotiated for, at least the new and pretty ones. But what we haven't seen is the underside of this data. So is there an underserved part of this market where maybe you can negotiate some value, you can get in below median price, you can do so with some negotiation room, and it's because it's not one of these like brand new listings that sells in 16 days. So you can't take everything at surface value, but just looking at the high-end trends here, this is a competitive market, so you need to know you're getting into that. Would I advise you to avoid this based on these numbers? No, probably not. Would I advise you to go into this knowing it'll be competitive? Absolutely. After I look at the data, I'm now going to go to specific comparable sales. I always want to see what's moving in that marketplace. You might understand that you can afford $200,000 comfortably. You might see that Rogers Park on paper sells for $191. So, hey, that's great news. You can afford at least the median sale price at Rogers Park. Then you might look at the actual inventory that's selling at $190 or $200 and go, wow, that's really not at the quality I was hoping for. It's not going to service our needs. It's missing something that I need. So there's always multiple levels of checking to see, are you buying at a good time, or does the market have anything to bear for you right now? This is a 3-bedroom request. So we're going to look at Rogers Park 3 beds. I like to look 6 months back. I do think that that's a good opportunity to just see what's moving in the market. If you want to really get an example of what's moving recently, like we just want to see the summer, I could do 2 or I could do 3 months. This is something where having a real estate agent is just invaluable for you because we can pull this live data, show you what's out there, and show you what's available. So you can see there's quite a bit of activity just across the board here. There's some listings that are on market right now under contract. There's some listings that are active, some that are recently closed, as recently as like a month or 2, some within the last few days actually. So it's been a relatively busy market in Rogers Park. You can see the 3 beds start on the very low end at 145, but most of them are just north of 200. So again, coming back to our criteria here, if 3 is a must and you're keeping that budget to 200,000, then this could be a difficult market to get in, knowing that there's only one unit I see here under contract that was able to accomplish that price or lower. So something to keep in mind when you're looking at it, if the inventory is not there, what's the likelihood that you're going to be the first one to negotiate to a threshold that doesn't exist right now? Again, if you were willing to be flexible though, if 2 bedrooms will work, 2 plus den or something of that nature, you can see the pricing would change drastically. Now we're looking at things as low as 130 and starting to range, quite a few before you even hit 200. There's 50 listings you could take a look at here. So when I'm looking at comparables, I usually like to have a base property. So if there's one home that we were looking at to make comparable sale data for, that's when you want to have a like-to-like asset. You can just make sure if that one has parking, this one has parking. If this one was built in a certain time frame, this one's built in a certain time frame. Certain floor level, certain floor level. It's like for like properties as best you can. You can certainly try and do that on your own. I would use like Realtor.com or Zillow does have pretty good information on it. It's just harder when you're not using updated like live data that's coming from the MLS, because what I can see in here is updated down to the hour mark of what other agents are updating. So it's always going to be a little faster. It's always going to be a little newer. It's generally going to be your most reliable source of information. I have access to all info here at MRED, which is, in Northern Illinois, kind of Chicago and the surrounding area. If you're looking for other markets, I can always get you in touch with a local real estate agent. Just let me know. But specifically this video, this is all about Rogers Park. We started with the 3 beds. Here's some 2 beds, for example. If you can get a good understanding of the market data at a high level, what are the median sale price? What's your ability to negotiate in that market? How much inventory is there and how long is that inventory sitting on market? And then you can zoom in a little bit further and you can look at the homes that are actually for sale, recently sold, under contract, and establish whether that makes sense for you. You know, if you're hunting at 200 and you know you need 3 beds and nothing in that marketplace has sold for that amount of money for 3 beds, that's not a realistic expectation. You can't sit here and hope that something's going to show up at 175 because there's no data to support that. But if you're looking at it like, hey, I want a 2-bed and my budget's up to 200, seems like there's a really high likelihood that you can succeed in that marketplace. Everything is about how you frame it and then how you approach the decision making in that process. So when you ask how I would approach assessing the market, that's what I would do. Macro and micro. Look at everything and then make a decision based on what you know. What are your criteria? Does it align with the market you're looking in? Once you've done that, then you can begin to answer the question, is it a good time to buy? Well, in this market, statistically speaking, sellers are probably making more than buyers are winning in negotiating out the dollar value. That doesn't mean it's a bad time to buy. It just means you're probably not going to get some great deal where you negotiate 5 to 10% off the list price. So don't hunt like that. Don't look at 225 knowing you can only spend 200. It's way too big a delta. If you are hunting at like 205, you can probably get away with sneaking out a little bit depending on the situation. Be reasonable and realistic for your marketplace and listen to the data. That will help you make educated decisions on how you approach it. In my opinion, is it a good market right now? Should you buy? In Rogers Park, it looks like there's no reason not to buy. It just is about expectations. If you are comfortable dropping that 3-bed down to a 2-bed, keeping that $200,000 budget in mind, I think that you could reasonably accomplish that in Rogers Park right now with some patience and just watching the market over the next couple of months. If you're stuck on the 3 beds and you need it to be 200 or less, I encourage you to start searching as actively and proactively as possible, because the opportunities that do come up at that price are probably going to move quickly. So something to keep in mind. I hope this video was helpful. I plan to do more of these, probably market specific as much as I can. The nature of real estate is these markets change all the time. So it's difficult to give you data that won't be outdated very quickly. That said, the process of evaluating a market, the process of answering, is it a good time to buy? The process of just making logical decisions in real estate is generally the same every single time. So use this to your advantage. If I can help, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to get in touch. Talk to you soon.